You hear that? Looks like a review. You think it's here to help? It's here to shoot you down. Let's talk about flight risk.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are back, the Ivy Storm podcast. So today we'll either be discussing or debating the movie Flight Risk. Now, before we get into that, you already know what time it is. Movie recommendation time. So, guys, what's the best recent thing that you want to tell the people?
I've had a number of people recommend Severance to me, and I checked out the first couple of episodes of it. And for people who don't know what it is, there's this company that you can work for, and if you choose to work for this company, you sever your work reality to your real life reality, which means when you go to work, you completely forget about your life, outside of work. You have no recollection of it, no memory of it whatsoever. And then when you're outside of work, you have no memory of like your work life and what's going on over there, like what you're even doing for work in there at all. Essentially, the whole premise of what's going on at the moment is that there's one person who's managed to unsever having recollections of, or like has regained his memory of what he was doing for work and what his work life was outside of work. And this whole thing is that he's trying to warn his best friend, or try and get his best friend to try to get him to piece together and understand what's actually happening at this company, and discover the deep dark secrets of the work that they're actually doing. I'm a couple of episodes in. It's a very, very cool premise. It's very interesting. Has a good mystique and intrigue about what they're actually doing, because when we do see them at work, they're doing the most basic and the most routine tasks known to man. But the work that they do, once they catch what they're trying to catch, induces this fear in them, and they don't know why it's inducing the fear in them. So it'll be interesting to go a little bit more into the season, start to uncover the mystery a little bit more, and see what's really happening in there. So yeah, so far I think the best thing about it is the premise and the idea about the idea of the show, and then we'll see once I'm a little bit more episodes in how I feel about the story and what was sold.
I've actually tried to watch that. I couldn't finish it. It wasn't even bad. I just think it was a bit slow. And I think with Apple series or just Apple movies, they're stuff it's that you have to be patient, because the pacing is, for me, it's kind of very slow. Yeah, I'm gonna definitely go and watch that again. This movie is definitely, I believe it will be top 10 movies of 2025 for me. Companion, A24 produced, and it was made by the makers of Barbarian, which for me is in my, I think it's top 5 or top 10. But in terms of Companion, yeah, I gave this one an 8 out of 10, solid. For people who don't know what it's about, a couple go on a weekend getaway with friends, and then madness ensues after the girlfriend kills pretty much the host, the host of the getaway, in terms of he's the one that owns the house. If you watch Barbarian, then you'll understand this movie in terms of how it was made, because I wasn't surprised when there was twists that were happening and just revelations. I recommend you guys to go watch Companion. That is a good one. It just came out last week, I believe. So yeah, go and watch that one.
So I watched Bridge of Spies, which is a 2015 Cold War drama movie. The plot is essentially a Russian spy gets caught in New York in 1960, and the story follows his American lawyer, who is appointed to defend him in court for espionage charges. And he's essentially the only one who believes the spy deserves a fair trial and has rights and that sort of thing. He essentially, in the end, kind of wins the trial. At the same time, a US spy plane gets shot down over the Soviet Union. The pilot is captured and is also convicted of espionage. And now the lawyer gets dragged into this whole hostage negotiation where the two countries can't or won't openly negotiate for the prisoner exchange. So they send in this lawyer who doesn't officially represent anybody. And so he goes into East Germany and he deals with the East Germans, who there's also this university student that found himself on the wrong side of the border when the wall went up, and he tries to get that guy released. And then there's the Soviet spy, and then he's trying to broker this 3-way prisoner exchange. And the whole thing is kind of a window into the inner workings of the Cold War and the nature of the conflict between these countries. A lot of emphasis is put on the East German perspective, where they're kind of beginning to realize, like as the wall is being built, they're kind of beginning to realize that they're not an equal partner in this socialist utopia that they've been promised and things like that. And there's the aftermath of World War II still lingering around and stuff like that. It does take some liberties with the historical facts. So this is something that like this is based on a true story and kind of move some timelines around in order to get scenes like this American lawyer watching people be shot as they're trying to climb over the wall into the West and things like that. Overall, the whole thing is a really, really good spy thriller, Cold War thriller, political thriller, and also kind of an examination of kind of the American self-image during the Cold War, where they're not simply the good guys, they're not simply the bad guys, or not simply hypocrites or whatever, but it's a lot more complicated. And that unfolds as he kind of sees kind of the political machinations that go into this kind of hostage exchange and his experiences trying to give this spy a proper legal defense, and everybody hates him for it and that sort of thing. There's a lot going on in this movie, and it's really smart and detailed and nuanced. It's basically like Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks at the height of their power, and it's just overall a good watch. Like that really treats that topic and that piece of history with respect, but also uses it to tell a really compelling human story.
The main event. Daniel, please let the people know what Flight Risk is about.
Okay, so Flight Risk is an action thriller movie in which like a mob accountant gets caught in rural Alaska. He's been on the run from the law. He gets captured and he immediately wants to make a deal and testify against this mob boss. And in order to get him to the court, they have to fly him with a chartered plane from like the middle of nowhere of Alaska back to civilization. And it turns out that the pilot that the marshals have hired is a mob assassin who is trying to prevent this accountant from getting to the point where he could testify. And so the movie essentially unfolds between the assassin, the accountant, and the marshal, who are kind of trapped on this small plane above the middle of nowhere in Alaska, trying to kind of survive and not crash. So what did we think of Flight Risk?
I think the Mel Gibson hate train has contributed to people's reaction to this movie. Now, I do understand movies are subjective, so obviously we like what we like and we don't like what we don't like. However, reasons for why this movie isn't good for me just doesn't seem justifiable. I personally think that this is a good cinema movie. It's definitely not going to be a movie that I'm going to go back to watch. However, it's a good popcorn movie. I had a good time. I enjoyed the setting of it being in a confined space and it being so tense and suspenseful. And I was actually thinking, because when films are kind of like majority of the film is based in just set in one location, I find it very, I like this type of movies because I want to see how they're going to kind of keep our interest. And they kept our interest. The movie wasn't too long, number one, which is good. And there was a lot that was happening. There was a lot happening between the fugitive and the air marshal, and the pilot and the air marshal. You know what I'm saying? So I had a good time. Of course, the movie wasn't perfect. There were times where I felt like I wouldn't say character performance, but I'd say the personality of for example, the air marshal was kind of bland. However, I started to get more into a character and I started to like a character a bit more the more that the movie was progressing and her character was evolving. So, and obviously with what happened, it kind of does make sense of why she's so kind of freaking wood, you know what I'm saying, like a chalkboard. So yeah, man, so overall I had a good time with this movie. Like I said, it isn't a classic, but it definitely is not a bad movie. I'd say it was a good movie.
I mean, the movie nearly lost me in the opening 5 minutes or 5-10 minutes that they spent getting Topher Grace's character from Alaska in this cabin that he was in, because he was just quipping and just saying a bunch of ridiculous things and whatever, and I would just be okay, it's gonna be this type of movie where he's just not gonna shut up and he's gonna keep talking for the whole movie, and most of the jokes aren't gonna land whatsoever. So I was very, very quickly braced for a bad time with this movie. But it slowly kind of like turned it around as the movie was unfolding. It got a little more interesting. Topher Grace's character became a little bit more entertaining, especially when he'd seen the pilot's ID and he was like trying to grab the federal agents' attention and stuff like that. I was like, okay, cool. Like this is a little bit more tolerable. And then kind of like overall, I wouldn't say there was like a great tension in this, but it was like some kind of like good suspense and good some like moments when they're in the plane and they're like kind of like having their back and forth and they're like trying to wrest control and obviously like Mark Wahlberg character is like being just kind of like relentless in his pursuit and whatever. It was cool. The ending was quite ridiculous. We'll talk about the ending. Just more so what happened in the ending for Mark Wahlberg's character specifically. I was a bit like, okay, this is you're kind of taking the piss a little bit. Like, okay, you could have been a little more inventive or creative with what they decided to do. But out of like all the January movies where they kind of like dump all the movies that they know aren't going to be great and aren't going to make big budgets. This is probably one I enjoyed a little bit more than the rest. It's like it's cool, and because I've got like a limitless pass, and because I've got like unlimited opportunities to go to the cinema, and the fact that I didn't have to pay full price cinema ticket for it, makes it a little bit better. It makes it like, okay, cool, I watched it. I'll probably never watch it again, but yeah, it was cool. It was alright.
So this movie has a lot going against it, right? It starts with a CGI moose. Winston, the accountant character, is annoying from minute one. It's got plot holes all over the place, right? Even simple things like how come the pilot does not get vetted? How come there aren't two marshals on the plane? Things like that. There's all sorts of little things you can pick out and say, okay, this does not make sense, or this kind of breaks the premise or whatever. And I think some of these things are overblown and some of these are reasonable. And I had a better time with it than I had with a lot of the movies we talked about in the last couple of months. And I still haven't quite figured out why that is. And my working theory is kind of that a lot of the movies made these days have some good bits and maybe a good idea or a great scene or a great performance. And then they have something else in them that kind of ruins it. And this did not have anything that ruined it. Yes, there are some plot holes in here that you can either can or can't look over. They didn't ruin it for me, and so I had a good time with this. I just enjoyed myself watching this movie, and that is more that can be said about some other movies I've seen in the past couple of months. I don't think it's a great movie, but just in terms of delivering a good experience, I had a good experience with it. Like, a lot of the flaws are both not fatal and really avoidable. Like, just about every flaw with this movie can be fixed with just a minor fix, I think. And I think that has something to do with why they didn't bother me as much, because they didn't really ruin the movie or introduce something that I just couldn't bear or something like that. So overall, I had a good time with it, but I can recognize the flaws in it. So let's talk about it.
Yeah, let us talk about it. So I think we should start off with the flaws, right? Because I think it seems that I say out of us three, I say however you probably didn't enjoy the movie a bit more. So I'm wondering from both your perspectives actually, what exactly about the film did you guys have an issue with?
So I mentioned a few of them, right? So the idea that they can that just some guy can show up as the pilot and does not get vetted. Like, there was no exchange where, hey, you're not the pilot we vetted. Oh yeah, he's sick, I am the cover. You want to verify my credentials? Oh no, there's a storm coming and we have to leave, otherwise we're grounded for a week and we don't have time for that. Like, you can imagine like an exchange where they justify why they just go with it. But it had to be at least acknowledged, right? This idea that they just hire some guy for prisoner transport. And maybe that's the only guy in the small town, whatever, but like, I think it has to be justified in some way. Because if some guy shows up who's not expected, they would get suspicious about that, because on some level, they're expecting that the mob would want to interfere with the prisoner transport, right? Another one is, how come there's not a second marshal on the plane? There's space on the plane, and it can't be a weight issue, probably. Like, it's like, and if it was, then that again would have had to be justified. And then, and that would have completely changed the movie, right? If there were two marshals versus one assassin, right? There are plot reasons for why there can't be a second one, but logically that doesn't make sense. And there are also other things like when they subdue the pilot, they just turn their backs on him and he repeatedly breaks free and attacks them again. And then they subdue him again, and then they turn their back again. Like, at no point does Madeline give Winston like the flare gun and says, if he moves, shoot him. and he just watches him the entire time. That's logically what should have happened, right? So there's a whole bunch of different things that simply do not add up and just are not logical and are detrimental to the general sense making of this movie, I would say. Have any favorites of yours I left out?
No, I think you kind of like covered quite a bit of it. Also, just like what's Mark Wahlberg's character called?
They just call him the pilot. He says his name is like his assumed name is Daryl, and he never gives a real name.
I'll call him the pilot actually, but just like how invincible he felt like through sort of kind of part of it. And I think like the part that annoyed me the most was like the ending after she's sort of shot him 3 times in the back, but then as they're landing the plane, he's somehow like fallen out of the plane, has gotten onto like his hands and knees, and then is eventually sort of hit by an ambulance. I'm like, okay, that's a bit like it's ridiculous. Also, like some of the scenes where like they're like wrestling for control over the plane, and they're like sort of kind of flying straight down into the ground, and then like at the very last moment they're able to like just like pull the plane, and like, you know, they're back to sort of flying normally again. So that it was just like things like that
into like a snow cap of the mountain.
Yeah,
like,
that was
like several meters of snow, and it's fine.
No, genuinely, I thought, oh, like, you know, maybe they missold it, and part of the movie is where they like are out of the plane and they're trying to like survive in the snow, but then like two seconds later they're like back in the plane and everything's fine. I was like, okay, cool, fair enough. We're just gonna move past that. So yeah, like Daniel said, it's actually there's like nothing in here that's like offensively bad or anything like that. It's just things just handled a little bit poorly.
And even those things you mentioned are kind of a little bit borderline, right? So one complaint is, why do they not shoot the guy? Well, they don't know how to fly the plane, and if I'm in that situation, I'm not gonna kill the one guy who can fly the plane. Even if he's belligerent and antagonistic and has been trying to kill us, presumably he wants to live and is not just gonna crash the plane, right? So I like and by just outright killing him, you're removing your one chance at landing this plane, right? At least in the moment. Whether or not that's actually the right choice or not is up for debate. But I think that just makes sense, right? You want to subdue him, you want to handcuff him, you want to talk to him, see how he takes. And then over the course of the movie, it turns out that he's a complete psychopath, that he does not care about dying for some reason. And I think that is one of the flaws as well, that we don't really get a very good picture of why he is this way. Like the one clue that I picked up on was he had been in prison, and it basically taught him that you either win or you die. If he doesn't win, then it's all over anyway, so it doesn't matter if the plane crashes. I don't think that's very convincing, Daniel, but that's what it was.
But he's a hitman.
Daniel, you're getting ahead of yourself. We've got the how would Daniel rewrite the movie section to come later.
Well, I wasn't even getting to that. I'm just saying that's the explanation the movie gives, and it's not really convincing.
He's a hitman, though, so they're already kind of given an explanation for their motivation. Like, I don't necessarily
but why he doesn't care about dying.
Why he doesn't care about dying?
And initially, they're under the impression that they can talk to him and reason with him on the logic that they all want to survive. And now that his mission has failed, he's going to land the plane and surrender, right? Because the alternative is just to crash the plane and they all die. And presumably, the guy does not care enough about his employer's goals that he would die for them, right? That's kind of what like hired hitmen, like that's kind of goes with the territory, that they try to do the job, but they're not personally invested. And it turns out that the guy does not care. He fully accepts his own death if he can't win. I don't think that is justified.
Wait, is that a written rule? Wait, the whole thing about hitmen, even though they are given a job, is not like they're gonna give their lives for whoever hired them. That's not necessarily true, because when it comes to the mafia, a lot of the time it's like a blood oath. So
yeah, they
are kind of like they're pretty much giving their lives up for whoever they work for. So for me, that's why I didn't necessarily like put like my main focus on him not, you know, an explanation for why he's not afraid of dying as something which kind of like affects his character. For me, it was like, okay, he works for the mafia. I already know how the mafia operates. So him kind of like not caring about dying, I think that's kind of like self-explanatory with obviously his role, the setting of his role, and obviously his objectives. So I kind of do understand that, you know what I'm saying? You need to be a madman to even try and kill someone with an air marshal on the flipping plane. So that told me all I needed to know, that he was a madman and he works for the mafia. So
I mean, I see what you're saying, but it's not made clear whether or not he actually works for the mafia or whether he's just someone they hired. I kind of got the vibe that he was just hired, in which case him dying for the cause does not make sense. But I don't think it's made very clear. And I think if it was the case that he's just such a loyal foot soldier that he will die for the boss, I think that should have been made a little bit clearer. And I don't think he just does. I don't think he just doesn't give any reason at all.
I see.
And then there's other things. Like one criticism I saw was the whole thing about the satellite phone, about why they're not on the phone the entire time. And actually, there's a line that they want to preserve battery. They don't exactly know how long this will take, and you want to preserve battery, and they can call each other at any time. So this whole thing about not being on the line the entire time, I thought was justified. So it is the criticisms are a very mixed bag, I think. And some of them make sense and some of them not so much. It kind of comes down on, yes, there are serious flaws in this. And the plot, I think, needed an overhaul. Just where you just justify why only one marshal, why can the pilot be swapped? Like they don't check his ID, for instance, right? Why do they not keep watch on him? Why is he able to sneak up on him? That sort of thing.
I hear what you're saying, but could you argue, right? That because their main focus is mainly between the relationship dynamic between all three of the characters on the plane. Could you argue that obviously the mistakes that they do make, like the plot holes, isn't really something, it's things that you can be forgiven for because that's not where our concentration is going to lie. I feel like those points that you guys are making, I don't think it's something which should cause a big of an issue where it's like, okay, this movie is trash, where when the film is mainly revolving around these three characters.
I don't think it's like completely killed our experience of the movie, because like we both said that we kind of somewhat enjoyed our time with the movie, but it's just like small things that can be like just like fixed in writing, just like small things that just probably didn't need to be the way that they were in the movie. Having a few extra lines in there just to sort of make it clear as to like why we're going with the direction we're going with, like why we're going with like one pilot in the scene, because like it's an immediate question as soon as it's happening. It's an immediate question as to like, if this is such an important witness for this case and like this is like the biggest case ever and whatever, how do you only have one person transporting them if you know that there's potential for the mafia to be wanting to kill him and wanting to wipe out this witness? I never like this whole thing of like this whole case rests on this witness's testimony, like that type thing. It's like, okay, why are you even in
do
trial?
They even do that? His testimony is really useful, and so they really want his testimony, but I don't think it's the case, right? Because the case, the trial was scheduled anyway, and Winston volunteers to cooperate, right? It's not like they are trying to get him. It's not like they're trying to get him to talk. He immediately surrenders and says, "Hey, I've got a deal to make."
But but they say that like if we don't get him to testify, like he'll walk. That's why like it's so important, so urgent for them to kind of get there on time. I'm very sure there is a line of like if he doesn't testify, he'll walk. So again, it's like another small pet peeve of like mine. It's like, okay, like how are you at trial? Like how are you at the point where you're at trial if you don't have enough evidence to convict this person without this person's testimony? Because then you're relying on chance. Like it's just luck that you found this person hiding out in Alaska on time, and it's just luck that you have just about enough time to transport this person from Alaska to where the trial's happening so that they can testify like right there and then on the day. It's just like sloppy writing in a lot of places in this movie, to be honest.
And virtually all of it is like that, right? Virtually all of it is fairly fixable. Like give the other two cops food poisoning and so they can't go. Or, for example, or have a storm come up so they can't wait a few hours to check the guy's credentials, and they just make the judgment call that it's probably fine. It's small things like this where that wouldn't add very much to the runtime, and the movie's already pretty lean, so you could add a couple of minutes here and there. And if you just make, it's the movie's job to achieve suspension of disbelief in the audience, right? Where the movie has to make us forget that this is not real. This is actors saying lines and this is not actually happening. And then once it actually does that, then we can enjoy the movie. If it doesn't do that, then it doesn't work. And by doing all of these things, that it just gets harder.
I would say it ties back to even like the beginning of the movie, because when they're trying to sell me on the idea that this is the type of person that has been working for something like the mafia for like ages and an accountant or whatever like that, and has been like handling their finances. I looked at him and at no point in the movie was I like, oh, like, this is someone that they would hire, or like this is like the type of character that they would sort of have like managing their money, any type of capacity or whatever. I just like, and I don't know why, like maybe I'm alone in sort of that thinking, but I was just like never convinced. And like the way that he immediately flipped and was like ready to like testify, like no hesitation about it. It's like, you know how serious the people you are dealing with are, and you like even say it at a certain point in some of the movie when he's like kind of like almost dying, he's kind of like reflecting on his like life choices and stuff like that, and he kind of like says he ended up like kind of like working for some of these kind of like shady people or whatever. But I don't know, none of it like felt like real to me. So like that's why at the very start of the movie I was like immediately like, this is not going to be great, just because one, he was talking too much, and two, I couldn't like buy into the character that they were trying to sell me at the start of the movie.
The one thing that doesn't make sense is that he's such a talker. It's not the first thing you learn in that situation that you shut up and don't annoy anybody, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that like an essential survival skill that you would internalize?
This is why I kind of disagree with you guys, because I understand, like, I don't necessarily agree with him kind of like taking the whole, he should have took the whole moment seriously in terms of like, the deal that he was being offered. Because number one, he's a civilian. Number two, that's kind of like that's his character. And I've seen many characters like this in different movies where they have that kind of like quirky, not nonchalant, but not serious attitude towards serious situations. And that's what I got from his character. That's why I was like, okay. Like I trust me, when it comes to like immature, over the top theatrical acting, I freaking hate that, bro. I hate that. However, his character, for me, I think it wasn't like when he started off, I was a bit skeptical. However, I think it kind of like fluctuated throughout the movie, which was good for me, because sometimes he will kind of, what's Mark, the pilot, I'm just gonna call him the pilot, but Mark's character, right? I think he kind of like calmed him down as well, because he was a bit like him, but he was more radical and more violent. He kind of met his match. Do you know what I'm saying? So that's why I think with like just with his character and the way that he approached certain situations, I kind of enjoyed the different personalities all of them had, because it meshed well. I kind of enjoyed his character. I think it was a necessity in the film.
Yeah, I liked Winston more and more as the movie went on. It's just the initial starting point of never shutting up, constantly making jokes. I don't think that is something that works very well with working for the mob. But then once we got past that, I thought there was quite a bit of nuance there, where it's very clearly a coping mechanism, right? He's not just an idiot making joke after joke. Like this is very much his personality, but it covers up like this nervousness that's underneath. And as things get more serious, he gets more serious, and he does make the occasional joke, but over time he gets more sober, right? He gets more serious. And throughout the movie, I think one of the things that made the movie for me, and was the reason why I ended up having a good time with it, is that both Winston and Madeline are kind of cardboard cutout characters when you first meet them, right? You've got the jokey nerd, and you've got the no-nonsense cop, and that's kind of what they are in the beginning. And over time, they become more three-dimensional. As they talk with each other and as they live through difficult situations and kind of overcome challenges, you see more and more of them. And by the end, I thought there were real people there. And specifically with Madeline, people are criticizing how stiff and serious and no nonsense she is. But have you looked at her, did you look at her eyes at some point? There was a lot of fear and panic and insecurity and even desperation there. No, I'm not calling it like an Oscar-worthy performance or anything like that, but there was something there. And over time, we learn more and more about her. And it kind of makes it increasingly makes sense why she is this way, and why she, aside from general survival, takes this mission so seriously, and why she wants to succeed so badly, and how she relates to her co-workers, like both her boss and the director that she talks to on the phone. I thought there was a character there.
Yeah, I agree. I think there was a lot of like breakthrough moments where you could see the old Madeline. You could tell that obviously she, the Madeline that we're being presented with now, which was later revealed on why she's like that now, because of obviously her witness that ended up dying. So, and obviously you see moments of Madeline, like you could tell. I'm assuming like the moments that, for example, when she was speaking on the phone to the guy who was instructing on how to or ride the plane, you see moments of
Yeah.
happiness, and then you'll see moments of, like you said, fear. You'll see moments of, do you know what I'm saying? So you could see like,
And even when
Yeah.
she says nothing, there are facial expressions and there are emotions in her eyes, right? There are several shots where we focus there's a close-up on her face, and we see there's a lot of emphasis on her eyes, and the emotions are in the eyes, right? The fear and the panic and whatever else. I just disagree with the characterization I've seen in other places where they just call her boring and wooden and whatever else. I don't think that's true.
how do you guys feel about the character motivations and obviously the decisions that they were making out throughout the film? Do you think they were justified?
So the pilot is the worst part of it. Like, people always say that like Mark Wahlberg's performance is the standout, and I think he's the least interesting part of this because he's just a psychopath. Like, there doesn't seem to be very much else going on with him. Whereas Madeline and Winston, I think, are both much more interesting. And it's basically like he basically turns into a slasher villain at some point, right? Where we've mentioned before that he refuses to die. He keeps coming back, and every time you think he's dead, he finds another way. He essentially stops being a character very quickly, and like pretty much after he initially tries to, I think he tries to choke Madeline or something. I don't know what. Like the first time he attacks her, and they subdue him and handcuff him like to the back. After that, he's barely a character. Like, he basically just taunts them and is belligerent. But in terms of an actual personality, I don't think there's much there. But and at that point, it just becomes about these two people who are stuck in that situation and who are not equipped to handle it. Like, they don't know how to fly the plane, they don't know how to trust, they don't know how to get out of this alive, and they have to kind of find a way. And that's the movie, basically, right? That's from like the 30-minute mark or whatever. That's what's going on. And I thought that worked really well. And like, I think broadly the decisions they make sense given the information they have and the skill sets they have and all of that. I did not feel like there was anything really wrong with how they behaved. I know a lot of people do. I know a lot of people say this is just the dumbest thing they've ever seen. And I'm asking, did you not see Rebel Moon? Did you not see Night Swim? Did you not see Imaginary? I will bring up our big spreadsheet. Did you not see Argyle? Did you not see Godzilla X Kong? Did you not see Ghostbusters Frozen Empire? Did you not see The Watchers?
Beekeeper.
Did you not
I
see...
knew someone was going to say Beekeeper.
Right?
You guys are
No,
haters.
actually, Beekeeper, I think it's not that stupid. It's I've got other problems with it. But like I'm talking about just overall badness, right? Like characters not acting in a human way, in a believable way. The situation not making sense. Did you not see Salem's Lot last year? Did you not see The Crow, Borderlands? It's a long list, right, of things where it's just outright bad, outright stupid. Characters don't behave like human beings. There's no logic from 1 minute to the next. It's just a homogeneous pile of badness. And I did not see that in this movie. And maybe it has something like a lot of it has to do with what other movies have you seen, and what do you look for in a movie, and what is important, what isn't important, what are your standards. And just having seen just whatever random movie comes out week after week for a little over a year now, this is like 70th percentile, something like that. Yeah. It's not the best. It's not even that good, but it's not bad. And there isn't even like drama associated with this, right? And I haven't even seen people like pin this on Mel Gibson or something. He's kind of, as a person, he's pretty much been entirely absent from the entire discourse. People are just saying this is just the dumbest thing they've ever seen, like with the worst acting, the worst writing. And I do not concur.
Yeah.
Like we spent like 20 minutes in the beginning just talking about all the things that don't make sense, and it's still better than Borderlands.
Yeah.
Right? It's still better than all the movies I listed. I don't know. Like, am I too much of a normie? Like, here's the thing. Normally, when I don't like a movie, I sit in a theater and I'm surrounded by people who applaud at the thing I think is stupid and obvious and tedious and whatever, right? This is Marvel humor. This is like they do something obvious that people are really impressed by, or something like that, right? Like whatever it might be. A lot of the time, I'm saying, really, this impresses you, and like, should we not have higher standards? And here I was with the normies. Like, they were laughing at the dumb jokes, and they were on board with the tension of watching these people try to survive, and I was there with them. And normally this doesn't happen. And I'm not entirely sure why it happened here and it didn't happen with like 10 of the other movies where I had the opposite reaction. But I don't think it's that bad. And I think the reason for it is that I like those two characters, and I think their mental state and their decision making and where they are during the plot and how they try to maneuver their way through this awful situation to survive. Even though there's no character arc, there's no big like deciding moment, there's no turning point, there's no crossroads, nobody makes a decision in this movie. Madeline has to decide who to trust, but that also does not really go terribly far. There's some themes in this, but not a lot. So in terms of my checklist of things I look for in a movie, it does not have very many of them. And somehow I still had a good time. I don't know, like it's a really weird sensation. And it can't just be that it didn't annoy me for 90 minutes and therefore it's above average. I think that's got something to do with it, but I don't know exactly.
It's not that it didn't annoy you enough for like 90 minutes, but I would agree with you. I feel like, at least it had some characters that you could get behind in this movie. And I feel like a lot of the movies that you did list previously, you didn't have that. You didn't have like someone that you were rooting for in those movies. Like, again, like if we're going to go back on the list. Yeah.
Or there was some big deal breaker, right?
Yeah.
Like in Abigail, I really liked the vampire ballerina parts of Abigail that were 10 minutes out of a 100-minute movie. But then in order to get to that part, you have to sit through an hour of the most insufferable people you've ever met.
I really like them, man.
Yeah, like
I really like them. Yeah.
But I just hated those characters. I do not like them. And I think once you make it to the end of that movie, there's some decent stuff there, specifically the ending. But my point is, often a movie will have a deal breaker, and then even the good parts can't salvage it. And here the good parts were pretty good, but all right. And the bad parts were not that bad, right? And it's like this, it exists in this narrow band of it's okay. And as I watched it, I had a good time. And when it was over, I did not regret having bought a ticket. And it's already a pretty good sign when it comes to a movie, because half the movies we talk about, if it wasn't for this channel, I would have regretted watching it. If there wasn't like a conversation at the end that I could then have, right? If it's just about was this worth the price of admission, half the time I'm saying no, it's not. And this kind of was. Like, I kind of enjoyed myself. I was in a good mood as I walked out of the theater. That's above average.
If it's not Mel Gibson's reputation, which is why people dislike this film, do you think the one location setting may have anything to do with it?
I don't know. For me, it's a plus. I like it. I like it when we have like a small movie, couple of characters, one location. Like, doesn't have to be exactly one location, right? But like, I like limited scope. Like, put a couple of characters in a situation, watch them figure it out. I like those kinds of movies, and I don't know that. Like, I've not seen it specifically criticized, but maybe that's a minus for some reviewers. Like, the reviews that I've seen basically just nitpick the thing to death, and some of that is justified and some of it isn't, and we've pretty much gone over the list. With most of criticism, I'm saying either actually no, I disagree with that, like the satellite phone thing. And the other side of it is, I agree, but I don't care. It's not big enough for me to kind of tank my experience of the movie.
Mm.
And I think it has something. I have this theory. I call it the first past the post approach to movies, where when you watch a movie, you have different dimensions, right? You have story, you've got character, you've got genre, you've got humor, you've got action, you've got cinematography, you've got set design, right? All of these different things that go into a movie, and they pull you in different directions. You like this, you dislike that, and at some point one of these dominates, and then the others. My theory is that the others become insignificant. Star Wars, if you are on board with the characters and with the spectacle and with the space opera of it, you eventually get over the hokey dialogue, right? Like, you realize, yes, this is not great prose, and I don't care because I like Luke, right? That's what it kind of comes down to. Or Darth Vader is cool, or I really like this. I really like the trench run, or whatever. You know what I mean? At some point, you kind of solidify your impression, and then you can acknowledge the things that are contrary to that. But at least for me, at some point, they become unimportant. And for me here, I like these two characters enough that like the logic problems of it and the plot problems of it did not become important enough to detract from that. And actually, I think they actually think one of the things I've not seen anybody else talk about it is there's actually a thematic level here, and that is that of redemption and second chances, right? Because all of the characters involved are seeking redemption, right? Winston got caught up with the wrong people out of greed. He was in it for the paycheck, and he turned a blind eye to the ethics of it all because the paycheck was just that good. And now he's trying to get out, and now he's trying to start over, and he's kind of trying to redeem himself, right? It just on a couple of different levels. And then Madeline screwed up one mission, and it almost tanked her career. She got relegated to a desk job, and she's got a second chance now. And she has to prove to not only her boss, but herself that she deserves a second chance. And that is part of why she takes everything so seriously. That is part of why she does everything by the book, because the one time she didn't, people got hurt. Right?
Yeah.
Like, this is not Shakespeare. This is not genius screenwriting, but it's there.
Yeah.
Right? And it kind of underpins what the different characters are doing. And then the pilot screwed up once, got into prison, obviously had terrible experiences there, and swore to himself that this will never happen to him again. So he will either make it, like being so good at what he does that he's never gets caught again, or he goes down fighting. And that kind of explains why he does what he does, right? Because it's kind of his approach to the idea of a second chance and it's a twisted kind of redemption, right? It's not really redemption, but in his head, that is his chance at a second stab at things, right? And if we try a little bit, maybe we can do the whole thing about the mole and the betrayer, like in the marshal's office and stuff like that. Maybe that ties into that a little bit too. I'm not sure it does, but I felt like that was enough to hold the different characters and performances together in my head. And like all the logic problems don't really tie into that, right? They don't really undermine that theme, because all it takes is put these characters in the situation. They're in the air. The pilot's not going to help you. Figure it out, right? I think that's part of why this works for me.
Yeah. Trust and deception is obviously like another theme, which is something which is a battle for them, right? So, and that's the conflict. So I think that also adds to the story. From like, and it kind of does allow you to kind of forgive the little plot holes that they do have, because that's not like, because the importance is in the story with that's happening on the plane. Everything else is, of course, you could argue is not the downfall, but it makes the film weaker. However, our main concentration should be in the film, like should be on the plane. So with the whole deception and trust and the constant, the internal conflict that creates more drama, and it creates more engagement. So for me, people are just nitpicking I feel like people are just nitpicking with the reasons why they're saying that this movie is terrible, because there's been way worse movies that just haven't made sense, are just not competent enough, just inconsistent when it comes to the storyline and character arcs. This one, I think it had enough to not be a bad movie, and like it wasn't a great movie, but like I said, it had enough not to be a bad movie, and I think it just had just enough to be a good movie.
And like normally all of these flaws would really bother me, right? Like I've gone on at length about how like Wolfman had some really things in it that I really enjoyed, but then the thematic level just broke it. But I think the difference there is that in Wolfman the theme is the point of the movie, and if the thing that's the point of the movie doesn't work, that's a problem. And here, the reason why there's only one marshal on the plane is not the point. So it just gets the ball rolling. Like I think that has something to do with it as well. The point of the movie works, and everything else could be better, often in significant ways. But it's not that big a deal.
Couldn't you argue that his character, because I do agree, like his character, there wasn't like layers to his madness, as in he was just a madman. So I do agree with that. The way that he was presented was someone that was invincible, and someone that just didn't have a reason for what he was doing. However, could you argue and say that listen, he was just a necessary evil to trigger the other two characters, and obviously which creates obviously the internal conflicts, which creates obviously the decision making that they're gonna have to make, and the kind of like the evolution of their character. So he was pretty much their vehicle for the real stars of the movie. That's why necessarily I don't have an issue, because I think you had a similar issue with Longlegs. What's his name's character?
Okay, so
Yeah.
let's go one by one. the pilot has to be there and he has to disappear halfway through the movie, right? That's how you get the scenario of how do we land the plane, right? I think everything about him could have been better and more interesting. I don't have a specific idea of what that should have been, but like his personality, the way, like for instance, how he's constantly threatening to assault the Madeline. Not unrealistic exactly, but also kind of tedious because it keeps he just keeps going and always goes to the same well, and it's a bit tedious. Could have been something different or could have been more varied or something. I'm not defending that character exactly because I think everything about him could have been much better, but like he has to be there, right? And he has to kind of be this way in the sense of he has to take off and then he has to not land, right? That's kind of what it comes down to. Yeah. And then if we're comparing this with Longlegs, my complaint about Longlegs was that I didn't believe that there was a person behind Nicolas Cage's performance, that he was just being weird for the sake of being weird, and then we were not getting glimpses into a real person who had reasons for behaving this way and doing these things, other than serving the devil, right? But beyond that, like all the specifics of how he behaved, I thought was just lol so random, and that was kind of it. And that was just not compelling. And here, the pilot is just the bad guy, right? He's bad in every way, right? He's not like you can imagine a hitman who's professional and courteous, for example, or you can imagine like this guy who kind of says, "Okay, fine, I tried to kill you, I failed, mission's over. Do with me, like arrest me when we land, but I'm not gonna help you." Could also be possible, right? So there's lots of different ways they could have gone, and pretty much all of them would have been more interesting than this. Which is how I find it a little bit puzzling that people say, okay, the one thing we like about this is Mark Wahlberg's performance. I'm like, really? He's the most cardboard cutout of all of them. He doesn't get more interesting over time while the other characters do. But anyway, that's kind of my take on it.
And I think that just I think in terms of why they liked him is because obviously he's just that necessary, because falls in line with him being that necessary evil. Because with necessary evils, they kind of create that thrill of the film. So I think that's mainly what attracts them to him. I don't agree. I don't think he was the best. I don't think he was the best character in the movie. I do believe it was the Marshal. I think she started to grow on me. I really like the guy, but I think the Marshal definitely, for her just her progression, just the way that she was evolving and the way her exterior was cracking and we're kind of like seeing her true self. I enjoyed how that was progressing. But in terms of like speaking about the ending, you guys did mention, well, Harvey, I think you were the one that mentioned, said Mark's character was kind of like done dirty because obviously he was presented as someone that was invisible, and then the way that he died was just pretty much BS. So how did you both? Yeah. So Daniel, do you have an issue with the ending as well? And if you do, what was the issues that you guys had with the ending?
The ending is kind of whatever, right? We know they're going to land the plane, kind of know how they're gonna do it. There's no specific hurdle that they have to overcome. They just have to do it. I've seen this a dozen times, including last week when we talked about Airplane, right? It was the same scene, right? In terms of like Madeline being talked through the steps and having to land the plane without much experience of her own, right? Like I've seen that in a dozen different movies and it always plays out the same way and it's not interesting. It's also not terrible. They finally land the plane and then the emergency services are there and then there's one last plant from the mob boss, right? Like the guy on the who takes Winston into the ambulance turns out to be a hitman too, and Madeline realizes it at the last second and shoots him. And I've seen people really dunk on that last shot where Madeline kind of sits in the ambulance with Winston completely exhausted, basically like the dead hitman lying next to them. And then we see a shot out of the back of the ambulance, and there's like 6 paramedics just looking at them in shock. And I've seen people make fun of that shot. And it's like not a great shot. It's also not stupid. I don't know.
I didn't have a problem with like that kind of shot. It's kind of understandable that someone that's just been through this traumatic experience and had to land a plane would probably be a little bit exhausted after having to do sort of exert energy one more time to sort of save the guy. So I didn't have an issue with that. Mine was more so just like the ridiculousness of kind of what was going on as they were landing the plane. Like, so, with Mark Wahlberg's character, with sort of the emergency services kind of following so closely behind a landing plane as well. It just kind of didn't make sense as to kind of what was going on in that situation. It was more around that where I was a bit like, okay, you're kind of taking the piss a little bit with sort of with what's going on. But after that, it was just like, again, like kind of whatever. I didn't have like any sort of any major qualms about it. But
if there's any problem with the ending, it's that nothing significant happens, right? There's no big character moment, no big confrontation, no big turning point. It's just, yes, they land the plane. And then
she catches who's the mole's meant to like been in this. They have a phone conversation.
And that happens before that, right? That happens catches them in a lie, and gets it wrong, and like that whole thing about figuring out who the mole is based on clues and background information. That was kind of the most engaging thing, because like we've kind of touched on this, like trust is a theme in this as well, where they have to trust each other, and they trusted the pilot, and that was a mistake, and that put them in this position in the first place. And Madeline has to trust Winston to not do anything stupid. Winston has to trust Madeline that she'll keep him safe. Madeline has to trust the director and her boss, and she doesn't know who to trust. It's not clear whether Hassan is in on it. Right, he turns out to be trustworthy, but you don't know that. The boss brought in Hassan meant that if she was the mole, he probably was on her team, or maybe not. Right, at least there's the question of whether or not he can be trusted. And it's nice that he wasn't also like a bad guy. That there actually was somebody in the movie that was just good. It was kind of refreshing. I don't know. It's I don't have a big problem with any of it. Like, it's definitely not compelling, but it's also not bad or stupid or nonsensical or anything like that. So it all kind of just adds up to, it's fine. I had a good time. Does not set the world on fire, but it's also not as bad as people say.
Before we go to last thoughts, did you guys have any like memorable highlight moments in the film? Because I think we've kind of, I wouldn't say we've been negative. I think we've been pretty like we've kind of been this film's cheerleader in a way. But
the most positive review on the internet.
Yeah.
Probably.
So but is there like any moment where you thought, okay, now that was highlights for me?
When Winston kind of has this panic moment of, oh no, they're coming for my mom. That's kind of where like the jokiness and the coping all fell away, and there was just a real person there. And kind of, I thought that was good. I think that's like a general with Winston as his progression throughout the movie, where in the beginning he's just all jokes all the time, and then over time that kind of falls away as the stakes get higher and the situation gets more serious. He becomes more serious and he becomes more of a responsible person, and he stops making excuses. He stops trying to make deals. At some point, he just decides that we're in this together. But there's a logical and gradual progression between start and finish. And I thought that was kind of the highlight, where kind of the inflection point is reached, and he says, no, this is serious, no more jokes. I am like we have to do this. We have to make this work. I like that.
It seems like we're at a time where we need to start talking about we need to start talking about last thoughts, unless anyone's got anything else that they want to say. If not, then last thoughts.
I'll keep it brief. It was cool. It was cool. Not going to set the world on fire. Yeah, it was cool. Like, and entertaining enough. Like, there's kind of enough in there to kind of go and enjoy the movie, to be honest. But I don't really have too much to kind of say out of that, so I'll keep it brief and keep it short.
For me, I'm actually, like I said, I had a fun time. This was like a nice cinema movie for me, where I forgave them for the stupid stuff, like not stupid stuff, but like the stuff which should have been kind of like fleshed out a bit more, like obviously what we discussed. So I kind of forgave them for that, because of obviously like because the main focus was happening in that one location between the three characters. So it was like the relation dynamic between all three was, that was the selling point of the film. And I think that's why I kind of like ignored the other stuff which didn't work. Yeah, man. I think for me that worked. Like I said, I do like like movies that are set in one location, because that's when a lot of the mental thinking and strategy and themes such as trust and deception and what to do and like what they're gonna do, like a lot of stuff like that is, that's engaging for me. You know what I'm saying? And I find I like stuff like that. So yeah, I'm gonna give this one a 6.75 out of 10. I wouldn't give it a 7 because I think 7 is like great. I'd say this is definitely not a great movie, but it's a good film, man. I'd say it's a good film for me. It was a nice cinema popcorn movie.
Overall, I had a good time with it. There's lots of things to criticize. None of them are deal breakers. Almost all of them would have been very easy to fix, which is frustrating. But in the end, I walked away having had a good time. I think if you can get on board with the two main characters, there's something to like there. And I think just nitpicking the plot logic, I don't think the movie is bad enough to really warrant that, to really make that, like, there's catharsis in really picking apart a bad movie. And I don't think this movie is bad enough to make that worthwhile. And I think if you're doing that, you're depriving yourself of a halfway decent movie. So for me, the rating is, it's fine out of 5. If you like kind of those kinds of movies where people are put in a tough situation, in a dangerous location, and they have to kind of figure it out and kind of have to make it to the other end. And there's some themes there of redemption, second chances, trust, pretty broad stuff that works, I think. So it's not terrible. If you're up for that kind of movie in general, I think it's entertaining. It's not a masterpiece. It's not high art. It's not brilliant storytelling, and it's very flawed, but it's fine.
Hi guys, you've heard it here first. Thank you very much for tuning in today. Hervé.
Yeah, let us know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Are you one of the few people that actually liked the movie like we did? Or were you not able to look past all the flaws and all the problems within the movie? Let us know your thoughts down below in the comment section. And of course, if you liked what we talked about today, then tell a friend. And if you hated and you thought we were chatting absolute crap, tell an enemy. We are the Out of the Storm podcast.
All right, guys, thank you very much. And we will catch you next week. Au revoir.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.